Jamaican because my mom was born in England and my dad is Jamaican, but that still inherently makes me Canadian. It allows me to draw on my background, whereas where I have family from the States and a lot of people from the States will just say, I'm African American. Okay, great. But like, where are your parents from? Where are your grandparents from? And everybody just says Black African American. But we know our history is so much more than that. It's so much deeper. It didn't start with slavery, which is what a lot of people, that's their starting point. For me, it's growing up in a Jamaican household where my mom spoke patois to us, especially when she was mad. We had Jamaican food. And then I have a family from England and I got that experience. So it's a culmination of these different cultures and experiences that still allows me to say, yes, I'm born in Canada and I am a Canadian, but I can also draw on these other experiences and backgrounds to make me completely who I am.
Mm-hmm. All right. Skin, from your perspective, especially being and working in media, how do you interpret that title?
Um, I really want to echo what Stephanie just said, because I think being Black in Canada, it kind of encompasses a couple of different things. Americans really grab onto the fact that they are American. Like, there's a lot of Americans that I know that they don't really talk about their lineage, where their parents came from. It's not really relevant. They're Americans, and that's it. And there's so much more identity, I think, with Black people in Canada as to what their actual culture is, whether they're Nigerian, they're from Ghana, they're from one of the islands, and that with a mix of us being inundated with American television, because the majority of the influences that we see visually and what the general perspective of what we are like as Black people is through an American lens. And so, yeah, I think you're constantly trying to redefine whether or not that's relevant to you and your experience, how you've been raised, how you think, how you act, etc. And I think the two of those things, it kind of forces a constant redefinition of who exactly you are and how you want to define yourself.
Okay. And Sandra, I'd like to direct that question to you. What is your experience and your definition or interpretation of the Canadian Black experience?
So just listening, it's good to be kind of last because I get to hear everybody's perspective. And one of the things that I would draw upon is definitely coming from a Caribbean background, grown up. Both my parents are Jamaican. One of the experiences that we always had as our family was very big on making us go back home, and living and being a part of the Jamaican culture and just growing up that way. One of the things that was like I barely remember summers here, because my parents would ship us to Jamaica and we would spend our entire summers there. And quite frankly, any holiday you could imagine that was a week long, we were gone. So, and it shaped who we were. And, education was a very big thing in our family. Got a great education. And that's when I realized how different, like it was almost like I had to not hide who I was, but kind of feeling like I was living a double life, right? You grow up super proud of having this great experience of being able to travel as much as we did, and growing up and appreciating that culture. But then growing up here, you had to sort of almost choose, especially as you started to make your career choices and, having honestly a double life, just not being a part of that culture that was where many of my peers were, getting my very first job in advertising, realizing how much there wasn't people that looked like me, being one of the only Black people in the company. So I think it was trying to appreciate and hold on to my roots and how I was raised and what I was exposed to, but also chasing good life of what I wanted to aspire to, but trying to being able to balance the two. So it's as you grow and you start to appreciate that, getting where I am today and where we all are today, it's taking that and being able to not be ashamed of it or hiding it as much as we probably grew up doing, to embracing it and allowing, taking that position that you're in now to give and make it easier for other people to continue. So I think that's part of one of the things that I would call out as a Black experience, trying to navigate through this crazy world that we live in.
Right. And this year in particular has been like extra crazy. I've never heard the word unprecedented so many times in a short frame of time. But one thing that kind of stood out to me is that people are using this time not only to stay sane, but to reset. It's interesting how, you know, there's different panelists from different backgrounds, but there are so many similarities between all of us. And I can, a lot of your stories and different experiences, just as you described what the Canadian Black experience is to you, resonates with me. And I'm sure a lot of the participants, viewers will find the same. I wanted to focus a little bit about being Black in the workplace. That theme came up quite a bit as we answered that first question. I'm going to start maybe with Stephanie on this one. What it's like being a Black woman in an agency, an industry where you don't see many people who look like you. And the further up you go on the corporate ladder, you see fewer and fewer people who look like you. How do you manage that as part of your day-to-day and just your 9 to 5? How do you manage all of those pieces? Stephanie.
I will say it's a lot of moving parts, as most of us know, in any industry that we're in. I feel very thankful to be working for Taxi Toronto, because I say this to everyone, it's the first agency that I've been a part of where I actually feel seen and supported. And the seen is the most important part. Yes, I'm Black, yes, I'm a woman. And I've operated in from corporate to advertising in my lengthy career. But this is the first time where I've been somewhere where I've actually felt like I see you and we support you in your endeavors. And to your question, that's why I started Black Taxi, because I want to start seeing more people that look like me in my space. You know, when I started in advertising, I started at JWT when it was JWT. And I like to joke that it set me up for failure, because when I walked in, there was one of my best friends now who was a dark-skinned Black girl at the front desk. And she was who I handed my contract to. And I remember I left and I called my mom and I was like, there is a Black girl at the front desk, because I had come from corporate banking and just landed in advertising. So I was like, oh my God, there's Black people in this office? And JWT had a vast amount of people from different backgrounds, different sexualities. I mean, we had a thing that we called the BWA, which was the Black Women's Association. And there was 15 of us across all different departments. And we used to gather and chat and create nonsense in the office. And we had GayWT that for some reason they let me as a cisgendered hetero woman start. And then that was a thing where we did events. And then I left JWT and went to somewhere else, and it was the complete polar opposite. And I was like, oh, this isn't advertising, this isn't. And so when I landed at Taxi and been working there for a while, and I said, listen, I kind of want to do this thing. It started after the murder of George Floyd. Our CEO, Rob, used to send out a weekly email. And that week he said, listen, we're not going to talk about new business. We're not going to talk about this fluff stuff. We're going to talk about what's going on in the world, and we're going to address it. And I'm going to let you know where I stand on it. And I thought, damn, I mean, this has been, BLM started in what, 2016? Nobody's ever sent a corporate wide note about that. And so I just sent him back an email and said, thank you for this. You know, it's been a tough week. I've been crying through emails as I all of us in the community, we struggle, but we put our head down and we plow through the work. And I asked, can we do something beyond donations or kind of a one-off? I want something sustaining. Back and forth between Rob and I, and then Black Taxi was born. And it wasn't even a conversation where he said, why do we need this? He said, absolutely, but this is yours and you're gonna own it and I'm just gonna be supporting cast. And I went, what's happening right now? Because as we know, that's not typically the experience, right? But he, as much as I wanted to see people that look like me in the office, so did he, and so did anyone else that I asked to be a part of the team, and anyone else that I talked to that didn't look like me, but I asked to support me in this endeavor and be an ally. They wanted to see us as well. It was just something as simple as me putting my hand up and saying, it's not like I don't have a million one things to do. Let me add this to my plate as well.
Right.
So that's how we got here.
Awesome. Awesome. Savannah, the same question for you, because you're not only a Black woman who rocks with the Raptors in front of the camera and behind the camera, but you're also a woman in a male-dominated industry. And I'm wondering how that looks for you, what that looks like for you, Savannah.
Like, I'll be completely honest, like, there's a lot of barriers. There's a lot of barriers just being a Black woman in general, of course, but then you take it to the work front. And, you know, I didn't just start off working for the Raptors. Like, I had to put so many building blocks in and really work my butt off to get to where I am. And I'm just gonna like be very blunt with that. You know, I was talking to another woman at the top of her industry in the States. Her name's Taylor Rooks, and she works for Bleacher Report. She's also a Black woman. Amazing. Every reference video usually comes back to her for like, we should do an interview style like this. So I had the chance to talk with her one-on-one, and we had a heart-to-heart, because it was like, wow, we can almost count on our hands how many Black women in media, in front of the camera, in sports, work in this industry. I know for a fact that in Canada, there's only two. It's me and it's Kayla Gray.
Yeah.
So it's a very tough industry, and me and her, we got emotional and we talked to each other, and me and Taylor Ricks, we said that, you know what, when you get to this, you know, point where you're in the NBA, you're reporting, you're doing what you want, you know, you're having fun with your job, you look around the room and you don't see yourself, and then you feel lonely. And it's not a fun feeling. It's honestly a heavy feeling. And, you know, to get into the room in the first place, you had to work twice as hard, if not 3 times as hard. And like, understand that your margin of error is so small, slim to none. You make one mistake, you say the wrong thing, people are so quick to like just cut you. And I thought that was like that for everybody. Originally, I honestly thought that. I was going in with blinders on thinking, oh, you know, if I was on, everybody has to work their butt off. Like I went through sport media at Ryerson, and they said, you know, it's a hard industry. You're gonna have to work really hard. And then next, you know, I saw my classmates get these high level positions almost like pretty fast. And I was like, really? Because like I had to go here, then jump to CBC, then do Tangerine sponsorship stuff, and then here, and finally I'm at the Raptors. So it's like where I wanted to be originally, right? And then every career goes different pathways, but I had to stop and recognize, be like, you know what? No, there's a reason why there's only 2 Black women in front of the camera for sports in Canada. Sports, yeah. All sports. And it's just not, there's just so many barriers systemically that, you know, a lot of our colleagues, like, it's not necessarily like they're in particular to blame. It's just that like they don't see it. They don't even know how to see it. And so finally with George Floyd, you know, touching on what like Stephanie said, similarly, my company stopped. We literally took a day off. The entire company said, no, we're not working. I had a film shoot for Budweiser Stage at Home because I was producing something behind the scenes there, and they called off the shoot. And they're like, no, we got to like focus on this. And we immediately switched gears into how can we be more inclusive and diverse. The conversations are still happening. And I think it's important for them to continue, because I feel like sometimes the momentum is slowing down on certain aspects. But yeah, that's definitely where I stand. Like, that's definitely where I feel in the media. It's not an easy position, and I won't lie to anybody here about that.
Right. And then I guess being behind the camera, Skin, how do you kind of navigate through those waters? Because we're not used to seeing Black people behind the camera as directors and power players, especially in Canada. How do you navigate through all of that?
It's a really interesting thing actually, because I think in general, as Black people, like we're constantly fighting that stereotype of being like the angry Black man, the angry Black woman, and having like that attitude, and you know what I mean. And that's pretty much the definition of being a first AD. Like you're the thundering voice behind set, yelling instructions at people all day long. And the job title kind of comes with. I think it's changing, but historically that job title has kind of been like the angry guy that's screaming at everybody, everybody's late, and so to kind of walk that line of having to be the voice of authority, you know, yelling at everybody on set and keeping time and being that one to push, but also maintaining that level of respect that the crew knows that you kind of have your back, their back, that you're looking out for them, whatever. It's kind of a strange dichotomy. It's like a magnification of what um, Black people go through on a regular basis, because you're always trying to kind of walk that line where you don't want anybody stepping on you, but you got to survive. You got to kind of get through and accomplish what it is that you need. Um, and I don't know. It's I'm not really sure exactly how I wound up in that position. I think I've been fortunate that I've always kind of had the right mentorship, at least one or two people that have always kind of been within grasp,
Right.
to kind of give me that right kind of tutelage to wind up there. I haven't really confirmed it, but I'm not aware that there's another Black first AD in Ontario. I've never met one or heard of one. So,
Mm.
you know, when I first, you know, started kind of elevating to that level, whether it was just doing, you know, second unit stuff, and they'd be shooting something and say, okay, Skin's going to go and run this unit or whatnot, and stepping into that position, it's you definitely, you're aware of the fact that you're the only one there. You know what I mean? Because even in front of the camera, typically you're on set, and there isn't a lot of shows where there's a lot of Black cast. There might be, you know, the one token person, but to be on a show that's quote unquote Black, or where, you know, the heads of departments are Black, like you're generally the only person there.
Mm.
Um, I can't say that I've had a lot of pushback on it. Like there's been definitely been occasion where, you know, people will come up to me after the fact and say, well, so and so said this, or you hear certain little things, but in general, you know, people aren't really trying to step over that line. But you definitely feel it. You're very aware that you're the only one. You're blatantly aware of that.
Only the lonely.
You know.
Yeah. Nadej, I wanted to direct that same question to you, because in your bio, we read that, you know, you're the only Black person in your agency, and having to be in that role. Savannah said something to the effect of, when you look around and you don't see yourself, it's disheartening. So how do you, Nadej, kind of navigate that, being the only Black person in an office in Montreal?
Yeah, so I will say that it's very challenging, because you always feel like, and I think many here mention it, you always feel like you need to work twice as hard. And especially because I started as an associate account manager, it's kind of an entry level job, but then I was promoted and to where I am now as a leader. But once you are there, you still feel like you need to prove yourself, being the only Black person. And it's not even like you feel. I think it's also around you. You feel like people will start asking you questions, just like, how did you get there? Why you? Why is it you that was chosen? So it's always that impression that you have in mind, like you need to justify why you are here. So you'll be giving more efforts to what you're doing than maybe someone who is not Black will do. But I'm very also happy to be there, because at Group M, I feel like I found a place where I am also because I would say that when I started, I had I would say wounds of previous experience that did not go well at all. And what happened is that in the digital advertising, like in this industry, as many people mentioned, it's not common to see not only white people, not only Black person, but Black women in digital advertising. It's something that was not common, and it started even when I was studying at the university. We were only two Black female in the class even, and what happened is that when I was looking for a job, I went through an interview, and the person who was interviewing for the job even went to tell me that you are never going to succeed in this industry.
Mm.
And I said, why? He said, you don't have the profile. I said, what do you mean? You can tell me that I don't fit for this job, but don't tell me that I do not have the profile to be there. And from that time, it really, I think there was a trauma that came out of this experience, because I felt like, why? I was always asking myself, why will he tell me that I don't have the profile? What is the so-called profile? I had 12 years experience in my country, like in project management. I went to school in the same school as anybody will go. I had a master.
Mm-hmm.
What else would you need to get this job? So I don't understand what you mean by profile. If I tick all the boxes to get the job, and you tell me that I don't have the profile. So I was very, very, I would say, happy to start working, and Ruben gave me that opportunity to start working, and I proved myself, and until I to the point of where I am now. And this is what I wanted to, and what I would like to share also to other people who would like to get into the industry, that there are opportunities. Someone should not stop your dreams. Stop. Like, if you have a dream, you should keep on working, and keep on looking for what you have in your mind. There's not someone who is going to tell you that you can't be what you want to be just because you don't have the profile. So this is how it's like to be. But for sure, I was the only person for the past 3 years, the only Black person in the office. But I think things started changing when it happens with that George Floyd events, where I started sharing my experience among the colleagues, to let know that there are sometimes, maybe there are unconscious bias that are really happening even when people are interviewing, etc. And I think it really opened the mind and the eyes of most of people there, and really started to look at Black people as maybe, like, if you look at my experience, you'll see that someone who is Black can also do something great. It's not just because you're Black that you cannot work, or you cannot give the same like work as anybody who will not be just like me.
Right. Somebody in the comments said, preach, Nadej. So yes, I concur. I co-sign that statement. Keith, I wanted to turn that question to you, just as an educator, because growing up, I know that I didn't see a lot of Black teachers. And once I did get a Black teacher in high school, it's just like everybody from the West Indian background, from the African background, just kind of gravitated to this one teacher. And he kind of became like a secondary father to many. Do you feel that that's the type of role you have in education? And how do you navigate that being a Black teacher, where, you know, just a generation or two ago, there weren't many, if any?
So it's interesting because as an educator, we have stories for days. 25 years ago, when I stepped into a staff meeting, I was the only educator, Black educator, of a staff of 50 to 60 people. I looked around the room and I said to myself, why is there absolutely nobody like me in this room? Then I made the transition into administration, vice principal. and I went to some of my learning network or area meetings and saw 3 of 250 or 300 administrators that were my color. And I said, this really, it is disheartening, but my train of thought and my mentality is that it has to change. So one of the things that we need to do, number one, and for me as an educator, we need to continue to have forums like this for the general population. And as an educator, I need to ensure that young Black people understand that there are people in the education system that they can aspire to. Mm-hmm. So just my representation alone here is one of the most important things for me as an educator. There definitely has to be a systematic change to what we are doing in education. And I'll tell you just a simple example. The textbooks we read, the English books that we read, geography, history, what do they all talk about? They all talk about our Eurocentric focus or a white experience. So one thing that I do as an educator is I make sure that my staff clearly understands. You have Black students in your class, then you better have culturally relevant curriculum and pedagogy that they can relate to so that they can aspire to. If they have Filipino or indigenous or people of color, make sure that your curriculum represents them so that they could be engaged and be a part of that process of learning. So that's one thing we need to change. The other thing that I also do as an educator is anytime I have an opportunity, I speak to my kids as I walk the halls and I engage them and I tell them, what are you thinking about doing when you get older? Oh, I don't know, sir. And I love when I get that answer because immediately what I say is, well, why don't you become a teacher, right? Why don't you become an administrator or a principal or a vice principal? Because the reality is, and I go back to the story that I shared with you earlier, being the only one as a Black man, only 25 years ago, one, that's a problem. So wherever I can, my influence is to encourage young folks to get into education. When I used to do it at my first schools or previous schools, a lot of the responses I got were, oh, sir, I can't deal with these students. Oh, sir, I don't have the patience to be in front of a class. Look how rude these kids are. And what I've been doing is trying to change that narrative and that focus to say, you can be somebody because you have the qualities to do that. So that's the second piece in terms of the systemic piece. What I will also say, just to sort of end off, is influencing the minds of the young folks, right? I talked about becoming a teacher. I talked about becoming an administrator. But another part of my job and what I do regularly as an educator is get them to think outside of the box, right? Skins made a very huge point when he talked about the media influence that we get and that what shapes our mind is mainly American. And because of that, there are things that I would say to my students that are unrealistic. And you need to change your focus and be realistic to who you are as a Canadian young person and start to aspire and do things outside of the box. So I hate to put this stereotype out there, but it is a reality when you're in my profession. What do you want to be when you grow up? Oh, sir, you see how much money Jay-Z's making? Oh, sir, you see how much money in Savannah's position, you see how much money those ballers are making there? That's all I want to do. And I'm like, you can't just think of that alone. You need to think outside the box. Become like Nadej, right? and be somebody in that profession. Become like Skin or Sandra or Stephanie. There are so many different avenues that you can explore that will help sort of get you out into the world and sort of allow others to aspire to. And that's the key in terms of shaping the minds and changing the young folks, for me as an educator.
Okay. So one common thread throughout a lot of the stories, I see that, yeah, the snaps.
Yeah.
One common thread throughout a lot of the stories that we just shared is representation. We go into these rooms, into these offices, into these classrooms, and we don't see people who look like ourselves. Like, I want to be making Jay-Z money. I won't lie, but I mean, there's only so many spaces for that. And there are so many other things that we can do. And just being the only Black person in the workplace, like we said, sometimes it's lonely, and sometimes you feel like you have to prove that, yeah, I'm Black, I'm just like everybody else. Like, one thing that kind of stood out to me at working at an agency is people who I worked with didn't understand how we go fishing every weekend, how we go kayaking, and we've gone skiing and we've done stuff that traditionally they don't know Black people do, but we go fishing, we go to the cottage. So it's just, you need to be able to see yourself, not just professionally in other areas that, you know, you might not be used to seeing Black people in those roles, which is great why we have something like Collective Society 360, so kids can see that, you know, there's somebody who looks like me who's a director, there's somebody who looks like me who runs an advertising agency, who's a teacher, and who isn't, you know, Jay-Z, Beyonce, Dwayne Wade, because that's them, they're already filling their role. So it'd be great to see us, people of color, in other roles. Another thread that came through in those answers is microaggressions. And we kind of deal with that, being the only person in that space. I know, if you know me, you know that I change my hair all the time. And I had a white coworker tell me that Monday is her favorite day of the week because she knows I'm going to come in with a different hairstyle. But I have to explain why I had dreads on Friday and curly hair on Monday. So I want to open it up to everybody there. We have a poll coming up, and the team is going to put that on the screen for you. The definition of microaggression. What is a microaggression? According to writer and therapist Daryl Wing Su, he defines microaggressions as, quote, brief everyday exchanges that send denigrating messages to certain individuals because of their group membership, end quote. The persons making the comments may be otherwise well-intentioned and unaware of the potential impact of their words. So some of the questions that we're asking is, have you experienced what you consider as microaggressions, either in the workplace, at school, either as a parent or yourself personally, within the community, or do you not ever recall having experienced this? And I won't go through the whole panel, but I wanted to start with Sandra. Just as far as microaggressions, is that something that you've experienced, and how do you manage that?
Yes. It's unfortunate, but yes, I have. And you know, I like you, I like to change up my hair. And you know, I like to change up my hair and like to do different things. And one of the hardest things is doing it on a weekday and then coming the next day to work. So I know you're talking about the weekend, but the fact that you actually even have to think about it is ridiculous. But as I continue to escalate in my career, to be honest, I thought about it more. The more I started to progress, the more I thought about it, the more I thought about Jesus. Now I got to deal with the people that I work with, And then I run people's business and their accounts, and they're going to be like, I don't understand how you're blonde today. Like yesterday it was black. Why is there streaks in it? And just these conversations. And I like I'm a carnival chaser. So when it came down to carnival time, that's when it went down to 22, 32 inches, all kinds of stuff, prepping for my flight. And you go to work because I don't know, like you squeeze every hour of work so you can get a longer time in Trinidad or Jamaica, whatever carnival you were going to. And people who are part of this know what I'm talking about. You squeeze out every day to be there longer, which means now you got to come to work with that long braid because you planned it this way, but now everybody's seeing it. And you have these crazy conversations like, oh my God, I didn't know your hair was that long. It's like, come on, you know, my hair could not have grown 15 inches. Like your hair doesn't grow 15 inches. So why would my hair grow 15 inches? And it gets to a point where it's like, I don't even want, like, I entertain the foolishness, right? I'd be like, yes, I straightened it today.
Yeah.
Because it was just like, if you're going to ask a dumb question, I'm now giving you dumb answers back. And it was hard because it's like, well, then when you be honest and tell people that you have an extension in, then you have to now deal with, well, how does it get in? And then the touching of it. And that I'm not okay with, but we've all dealt with it. But it's like now it's like we have the internet, we have Google, like Google and figure out how it was done. Don't come up into my hair. It's so uncomfortable. And I just feel like there is a point where you don't have, like you have to just start to have this conversation with people. And I remember, I don't know what movie it was, but I remember who's a very senior person at the ad agency, and she was running trading. And I can't remember what movie this is, it's drawing a blank, but oh, Dear Black People. And she saw that episode, and I kid you not, Monday, she came into my office, closed the door, and she was like apologizing profusely because it was at that moment where she realized what she and other people were doing, and just didn't recognize that it was being done. And to be honest, that's probably the moment where I realized that I need to name it, call it out, and educate. Because I think as much as we're sitting here talking about the color changes, the fact that you went from braids to 22-inch hair, and all these things that you do, but and crochet hair, and you don't talk about it, you're getting angry to a group of people who just don't understand. And that movie, right or wrong, whatever you think about it, or that show, it helped her understand something that I never talked to her about in the 5 years that I was working with her at that time. So bad on me. And that's when I realized these are moments where you got to name it. You got to call things out that bother you, and stop going home and talking to the people who look like you, who understand the hell it is that you're talking about. What about the people who don't understand what you're talking about? So how about having those conversations? So kind of went on about microaggressions around hair, but it really does open that moment where you start to think about how you can stop being mad about things, but start educating people about the things that really piss you off so they can stop doing it too.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Sandra. Skin, how about you as a Black male in media? How do you manage those microaggressions? Have you experienced that? And what can you share with us today about that?
Wow. Let me flip through the Rolodex of experiences. I always describe myself as not really having a medium. I kind of go from 2 to 11.
Mm.
But I describe myself as having a good temper, because I know that I can kind of snap on people. But because I know that, I generally, if something's really feels out of pocket to me, I really process it to make sure that I'm going to address it in the correct way
Mm.
before I wind up on the news, which is kind of like, that's kind of my joke, that I'll be like, I may be on CP24 tonight. Like,
24.
Yep. I gotta wait and see what's gonna happen. So a couple of years ago, I'm sitting on set, and the studio is very, very dark, and I'm sitting behind a monitor, and a guy who he's a technician who I know. I've worked with him for a couple of years. Very nice guy, and he comes into the room, and he was about to leave. He was going to go do another show. He was leaving, so he walks up to the monitor, and he sees me. He says goodbye to a couple of people. He sees me behind the monitor, and he says, hey, Skin, it's really dark. I almost didn't see back there. Why don't you smile? And I was in the process of standing up to go and say goodbye to him, because I heard him obviously saying goodbye to some people.
Mm-hmm.
So immediately my temper's at like 1,000 degrees. I'm furious.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to disturb the set to like make this entire event about what just happened or whatever. And also I know him. Like, this is like, I know this guy. Like, we've talked about doing projects together. We've emailed back and forth. Like, he's called me, hey, what are you working on? Is there any work? So I sat down and I sent him a text message, and I said, hey, just so you know, I know you, and I'm sending you this message because I know you and I understand the kind of person that you are. But it's important that you understand that if we were not at work and I didn't know you, you may have 4 less teeth than you do right now, because that is completely unacceptable. And I'm not even sure exactly what it was you were thinking when you just said that. That's a disgusting comment. And you really need to understand that that's totally inappropriate. And he had no clue. And he sent me about 40 text messages after that. Oh my God, I can't believe I said that. And I'm so sorry. And I got nervous. I didn't know what to say. Blah, 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 blah. And so we kind of squashed it. But it's one of those things where I feel like I need to address it immediately. Like, I don't want that stuff to go unchecked. But like I said, I feel like I have a good temper. I'm pretty good about pulling people aside. And I really want you to own what you just said. Like, I'm going to ask you, what did you really mean by that? Because I know what I'm thinking, but I'm going to make you qualify what you just said. And when you're sure that that's what you really meant, now I'm going to address that in whatever way, you know what I'm saying? But I'm going to give you that opportunity to really, really figure out, like, if you're not really catching the message that this isn't going the way that you intended it to, then whatever happens after that, that's on you. But, I think it's really about being tone sensitive and, understanding who it is that you're speaking to.
Right.
Like, I think if you really overstand people, and which I think as Black people, I think we have to. I think it's much more common that we have to walk through life and understand what it means to walk in a room and everybody's white and know how to communicate in that way. You have to be, bilingual in that sense, whereas the reverse is not true. Because
Right.
I don't think that there's very many white people that I've encountered, at least not in Canada, that ever have to think about that. They're not thinking about they're going for a job interview and you're going to walk in and the entire room is Black. That's not really going to happen. So it's not something that they have to consider, because it's not existent. But I think if you have that, I think that being in Canada, that's a skill that you attain, and you have to really hold on to that and understand what that is and how that can benefit you and kind of move correctly. And there's some days that you have to, you have to really, I equate it to being, everybody in life wants the same things. We want comfort, we want love, we want validation, we want, success in our jobs. It's all competition. Everybody wants exactly the same things. Sports are also competition, but in sports, there's lines. You play tennis, there's a line. You play football, there's a line. You run track and field, you got to stay between the lines. You can't go out of your lane. In life, there's no lines. So sometimes you have to explain to people where the lines are, because sometimes they step out like they don't know because there's no lines.
Line steppers.
You know what I'm saying? So you
Yeah.
have to, you got to pull out the whistle, tell them that's a foot fault,
Mhm.
and let them know where the lines are, because a lot of people, they don't know. You know
You
what I
have to
mean?
tell them to stay in their lane
I'm
and
saying?
be respectful about it too. Because sometimes what they might feel is a joke, and like I said in the definition, well intentioned, it just comes across as being very insulting. So to your point, Skin, yeah, you definitely have to teach people how to treat you.
But I think there's always that opportunity to decide how you're going to make that statement.
Mhm.
Like sometimes they step over the line, and stuff might go bad, and you can get kicked out of the game.
Mhm.
That's what happens.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I think you definitely have to pick and choose what those moments are, and understand what's at stake. Like I've always kind of moved in that way, I think. But I have two sons, and when my first son was born, um, something had happened at work that really, really made me redefine that for myself. And I made myself a promise that I would never go home, and if my son asked me what happened today, I'm not going to tell him anything that I'm going to be embarrassed about. You feel me? Like I have to be the template. I have to be the role model. So if
Exactly.
somebody's going to deal with me in a certain way, and maybe that means that I get fired and I don't work there no more, I'm good with that. But when my son asks me, why are you home when it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon? I'm going to tell him that I made a choice. I'm not staying there because it's not worth it to me to be in that situation. But whatever I tell him, I'm not going to lie about it. And I'm going to have to be proud of whatever that is. But I'm not going to raise him to think that you can't be who you are, or that there's something wrong with who you are.
Right.
At any point, if he asks me, what did you do, to how was your day today? I have to be proud of whatever that answer is going to be. Otherwise, I made the wrong choice.
And that's something that we need to be aware of in our day-to-day lives. We're not just representing ourselves. We have younger people who are looking up to us, whether or not you have kids. You might have little cousins, nieces, nephews, or even up and coming colleagues, who are of color and are looking at you within your role. Like that's a heavy weight to carry, but you're not doing it just for yourself.
No, because I think it's the example, like the comment that I made earlier about the media. I think that's hugely important.
Mhm.
Our representation in the media, whether that's in front of the camera, or what we're writing, what we're directing, like the images that we're putting forward. But we also have to remember that we are the media.
Mhm.
Like if I'm out on the street and I'm shooting and people are seeing me, that's the example. That's what they're seeing. Like there was numerous times when I used to work on suits for years, and the famous corner, downtown, that we would always shoot on. And as soon as anybody saw the cones on there, everybody would show up, and they would know that the show was going to be there that night. We would typically be there on a Friday. And I remember going in and like talking to the crowd, and what I mean, getting them to calm down. And I would see, on the occasion, I would see like black people in the crowd looking, and they realized that, oh, that's the guy. It's like he's like, because I'm the one telling everybody quiet, roll camera, like, oh, it's him. And I could see the look on their face, and they're surprised. But we are the example. You know what I'm saying? It's not just about what happens in media has to echo what our life is. So we have to be the example so that those stories exist, and then we can tell those stories because we've created them, because they're real. You know what I'm saying? But I think that's hugely important, that that we represent what it is that we would like to be, as much for ourselves and for the people that are going to come behind us.
Mhm. Okay. I want to take this moment. Thanks so much for that, Skin.
You're very
I want
welcome.
to take this moment to kind of go back to the poll that we did a short while ago, just discussing what microaggressions are, and if the participants have experienced that. So 65% answered that yes, they have experienced what they would consider microaggressions in the workplace. 26% said yes, they've experienced it at school, either as a parent or themselves. 3% said that they experienced that in the community, and 6% of the participants said they don't ever recall having experienced any kind of microaggressions. So interesting. A lot of it does kind of shine in the workplace. But another thing that we did talk about through answering those questions about microaggressions is not just representation, but mentorship and being a role model and what that looks like. So for the next segment of our discussion, I kind of wanted to talk about the future and what we can do. Like, we've recognized that there are issues. We're not all going to solve them tonight, unfortunately, but it took us hundreds of years to get here, and it's change is not going to happen overnight. So I did want to focus on what the future would look like, and what does allyship look like. We'll start with ourselves. How do we change our own conditioning and our own prejudices about each other in the workplace and just in day-to-day life? Let me start with Stephanie. I'll start with you again for that one.
That is a loaded question. I'm always a big fan of conversation. Communication, I think, is so important. I like to say a lot of the time, and I'm sure you guys have heard this before, like, you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Like, we can't have these conversations. We know what it's like to be us day in and day out. So it's so important to talk to people that don't look like us. And to your question about allyship, it's so important for our allies to help us out, because this is something, I mean, I walk as a Black woman day in and day out. I'm surviving racial trauma. To Skin's point, the media is telling us who we are, what to do, and how we should move in this world. And then you go to work and you're dealing with the microaggressions. We really need our allies to step up. I mean, like Sandra was saying, Google is available 24/7, 365. And the best thing about it is that it's free. So please try and use it. Don't always lean on us to give you the answers. I'm happy to answer questions, but I'm not going to answer questions for you day in and day out while also trying to do my job. So I would love for the conversations to happen outside of our community, and for the allyship to be more of the forefront of these conversations. That would be lovely for me. And to really, I mean, I think it's also important to lean on each other and come together across different industries and different positions. I notice a lot, especially in Toronto, I'm not sure if the rest of you do, there's a lot of this crabs in the bucket mentality. And there's so much money to be made. There's so much opportunities that I think we can all be the key. Like, I work in advertising and I have this Black taxi mentorship. I would love to connect one of my Black taxi interns with Skin, you know what I mean? To get behind the camera and produce work and do stuff like that. But they're with that mentality, you know, Skin could be the guy that's like, I'm the first and I'm here and this is my position. But I mean, I'm not saying he's going to do that, but we all need to be on that same level where it's like, let's all build together. Let's all do this. Let's elevate each other. You know, I'm trying to retire soon. I would love for another young Black person to come in and do my job and let me go carnival chase and do whatever I want to do. But we can't do that if we're creating barriers for each other, right? So talk amongst ourselves, allies, please step up, ask the questions, be engaged, you know? It's great that you're online and you're posting your Black square and you're hashtagging Black Lives Matter in your bio, but like, are you talking to your granddaddy that voted for Trump? That's the difference. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So action, communication and action.
Right. Savannah, I wanted to address that question with you. And thank you so much, Stephanie. You mentioned so many things in there, which was like, Savannah, directing the question to you. What does the future look like, either like within your own organization that you work in, because with the Raptors, there's a lot of attention on the team, and the team has been very vocal with the whole Black Lives Matter movement. how does it look within your industry looking forward to the future?
Oh man, it's funny because I've actually gotten asked this question recently, and someone said, "Give me the next 10 years," and I was like, "Man, I wish I could," because although people, they talk about change a lot, we got to see action to follow. The Raptors, they hired John Wiggins, who's the organizational culture and inclusion vice president now. So he works on the same level as Masai Ujiri. And his role is to create change, not just within the Raptors organization, trickle down, but in the community, getting in there, asking them what do they need, how can we better support the Black community to get more involved in not just sports, but like other opportunities within the community. And so I'm waiting, like discussions have been had in terms of that. And on the Raptors end, how do we make the broadcast more diverse so that you're seeing more people, recognizable faces that you see of yourself in a broadcast. I know we've also had a few discussions about how do we incorporate diversity, not just as like personnel, but like stories, and how do we tell our story and type of thing. And I know we were going back and forth, and sometimes it's as simple as just changing up who's telling it. And traditionally in media, it's been the same person. It's just been usually a Caucasian white, like a man or a woman sometimes, but typically a man telling that story. So like, let's have a Black woman tell the story. You'll get a whole different vibe just by simply changing up the voice. Stephanie actually pointed something out when she said that, sometimes people like, it's crabs in a barrel. And I actually had a story that came to mind exactly when she said that. And that like one of my colleagues and like close friends now, like she called me one time, and this is around the BLM, like George Floyd era, I don't know what to call it, like time frame, that BLM was really at the forefront of everybody's faces, and like MLSD was like, yo, we have to do something. And so they had my colleague, she's also a Black woman, and they had her interview Sarah Chan, who is a coach for this documentary series that we do called Giants of Africa. And she's a high profile woman in basketball. So they had my colleague Tony, who's traditionally behind the camera, interview her. However, so she called me before the interview, after the interview. And she was like, Savannah, I just wanted to like tell you that like, so MLC gave me the opportunity to like interview Sarah Chan, and I always look out for you, and she was like explaining herself. I haven't even said a word. She was explaining herself as to why she was interviewing Sarah Chan, as if I would have been offended, that like I didn't get that opportunity. I'm the on-air person. And I said, Tony, like there's no need to apologize. Like it's okay. There is room for both of us and more. If there's room for many other people that look the same, then there is room for us, and we could bring in more people. So don't worry about me. I'm happy you had that opportunity. Trust me, they could use 2 Black women on camera. And then she's like, you know what? You're right. Why am I apologizing? Yeah, I'm like, yeah, you don't have to explain. I'm happy. I can't wait to watch it. So yeah, I think it's like supporting each other, looking out for the future as well, because a part of this problem that I'm finding is that okay, we want to get more of our community involved with what we're doing, all right, now we got to look and be like, do they have the skill set? Are we setting them up? If we're going to just give them an opportunity, we want to set them up for success, not failure. So making sure that they have the skill set to enter the position that they're about to, before they're just giving it with no background, no reference, no like, okay, I'm just gonna wing it. And to be honest, a lot of us have won it before, and like somehow we've gotten to where we are today. But that's not a surefire success method. Like you gotta have a mentorship, like collective society.
Yeah.
So it's just ensuring that we have our own backs. Of course, don't be crabs in a barrel. There's room for everybody at the table, but then also ensuring that the next generation has the skill sets and tools to come into your workplace as well. More than enough room.
Absolutely. I wanted to direct that question to Nadej as well, being, you know, the only Black woman in her organization. What does that allyship look like to you? I'm sure, like me, like all of us on the panel, you've had people come up and say, "Well, I want to help. I just don't know how. What do I do?" And like I said, we're not going to have, you know, one band-aid plastered answer that can heal the world. But Nadej, what does that look like for you in an agency where you're the only Black face that you see from 9 to 5 every day?
Yeah, I think that by being myself and giving the work that I work is being also kind of a representation of like what Black people can do. So it's just being the best that I can be in what I'm doing will also give a sense of what other Black people like me are able to do. For me, it starts like that. And second, I'm also as a mother, because as I mentioned, I have kids. It's also educating my kids on not having limits to what they are able to do, and preaching the same thing around my community, like the people I know around me, not limiting themselves to jobs that will be called that are just for Black people, and not look at other jobs that are only for white people. So they should be thinking, they should be open, they should be looking for other opportunities, not just focusing on, because even within the community, I was told, for example, that, oh, you are learning marketing, oh, you will not find a job there. It's not the type of jobs that Black people will have. So don't worry about it. You will not find anything there. So change that mentality in our own communities. It's something to do, and at the same time also, I had the opportunity at Group M to share my story. And also we had kind of, I won't say education, but it's kind of, when sharing your stories, it also helps the others to really find out that they have some unconscious bias maybe, and also the way they perceive the Black people will start changing even within our office. So sharing stories is important, I think. Not every day, as Stephanie said. I'm not going to do that every day because I have my job also to do. It becomes tiring at one point, but if you have the opportunity to share your story, I think it's also important, and also involved in any mentorship kind of initiatives. We have some projects within Group M with the I would say the Black community within Group M, so that we are going through, and I'm really looking to be engaged in those activities in order to also support other young people or anyone who would want to join like the digital advertising industry.
Okay. Thanks so much. I wanted to open it up to some of the questions. I see a lively conversation going on in the chat room. Jackie, I'm going to ask you if you have any questions from the viewers, whether or not it's directed to somebody in particular. If you can just pull a question and share it with everyone.
Yeah, hi, good evening, everyone. We have a question for Stephanie. Someone is asking, how do we get Black taxi interns?
Oh, simple. If you're Black and you want a job or interested in a job in advertising, you can go to, I'll drop the Black Taxi website in the chat for y'all right quick. But you can go to the website. There's an email address for Black Taxi where you can apply. Taxi is actually committed for the next 2 years to only hire Black interns. And I want to emphasize that it's a paid internship because we don't do modern day slavery around here. And so you're not going to get a school credit. You're going to get dollars in your pocket for working for us at Taxi. And another great thing I want to mention is that the internship a lot of times will draw just from post-secondary schooling. We have rewritten the HR practices. We've rewritten job descriptions. I've I've just like took the table, y'all, and flipped it and was like, guess what? We're starting from scratch. So if you taught yourself how to use Photoshop and Illustrator, holler at me at Black Taxi. If you taught yourself to use a camera and you made some films, holler at me for Black Taxi. Because as we know, these kids are making better TikTok videos than a lot of the commercials we see on TV. So if you are Black and talented, please holler at me through Black Taxi. The only requirement, like the basis bare minimum, is that you have to be Black. And yes, we do video calls to make sure you are Black. So don't think you're gonna be able to skirt the system that way. My team knows video calls, please determine these people are Black. So apply. I'll drop in the website for you, but it's really that simple.
Perfect. Jackie, I think we have time for one more question before we wrap up.
Okay, so we have a comment here. The best part is there are people out there who have taken a stand to build together, and that is amazing, not only for themselves, but also engaging their company and employees to make a difference. The momentum is starting and positive. How do we keep it consistent and long term? So to anyone really.
Yeah.
Even our participants.
Why don't we direct that question/comment to Keith? I'd be interested to hear from an educator point of view where he stands with that.
I was just writing down Stephanie's website there because I got a whole ton of students that are coming her way very, very soon. For me, what it is, it's again, I'm in a profession where education is the key, right? Every single day we have to educate and influence the minds so that they understand the opportunities that are out there for them. One of the things that I think is important as well too is that I cannot ever forget where I am coming from and who I am as a Black man. Because if I forget that, I've basically lost myself and are pursuing things that really aren't realistic. So remembering who I am, the struggles that I've gone through, the things that I've done in my life, now how can I pay that forward to this generation of youths, either in the classroom, but also I do that through coaching, right? So when I get out there, I sort of allow my hand to reach another segment of the population through my experiences, right? So I think that's really the key. In terms of the allies, I wrote down a point here because you did sort of discuss that piece of allies. We can't just wait for allies to get on the same side that we are on. We have to persuasively bring them in to the fold, right? And again, it's done through education, but it's done through allowing them to see your experiences, understand your experiences, address the microaggressions like Skin and Sandra have done, calling it out, because in education, quite frankly, especially in the TDSB, there is no room for racism, discrimination. It's called out immediately by whoever sees it and whoever hears it. So we need to take that concept and we also need to move it forward within society, that we are calling out these things and naming it for what it is as soon as it happens. Because sometimes people are just ignorant and wrapped up in their own shell and their own circle of life, that they don't understand the pathway that other people have walked. So I think we need to get to that point in order to move forward and continue to develop allies.
Beautiful answer. All right. I'm told we have one last question, Jackie.
Yes. Do you think we should, as an industry, open source all that we're trying and doing individually? So D&I isn't done as a competitive advantage for agency brands, but just the right thing to do. Now, I'm not sure what D&I is.
Diversity and inclusion.
There you go.
So the question is, once again, do you think we should, as an industry, open source all that we're trying and doing individually? So diversity and inclusion isn't done as a competitive advantage for agency brands alone, but it's just seen as the right thing to do, just as the baseline of being a human being. How do we navigate through that one? Sandra, did you want to answer that one? Maybe jump in with that one.
Yeah, I do, and I do. I understand the point of the question, but I strongly believe that you have to start with the things that you can actually change. So wherever you're, like, you know, it takes that to start to move the mountains, if you will, right? And one of the biggest opportunities that I had, I mean, I've been in the industry. I had quite a journey to get where I was. I totally do believe in allyship, and I don't think I would have gotten where I was if I didn't have that white leader who believed in me and who did give me the opportunity to move forward. And from there, I was able to knock down doors. I am the first and only Black executive on our board of directors in a North American setting, which is crazy, but it's true. But I think when given this opportunity to spin off an agency as we did, I looked at this as a huge opportunity, similar to what Stephanie did, was I actually want to change what's in my ability to change. And that is, I want to hire my people. I want to hire a good sector of people that wouldn't get into this industry otherwise. We need to stop hiring where we're hiring and recruiting from where we're recruiting, because you're never going to get that exclusivity, diverse group of people if we continue to go to the universities and go to these places that we're recruiting. And no fault of our industry, it's just where it was. And you know, I take pride in the position that I'm in. It's a huge responsibility, and because of that, I think it's super important to make that voice heard to more people, which is kind of why I do believe that you have to take control of the things that are in your control in order to affect change. So that's kind of my position on that. And yes, I do think it gets public, but I think you kind of have to work within your sphere first.
Mm-hmm. I think Stephanie had one last comment to add to that.
Yeah, I'm just like, I get, like Sandra's saying, I get the idea behind it. And if anyone's to ask me how I did Black Taxi, I have a whole deck that I can send you about how we laid it out and how it works. I'm not precious about that at all. My hesitation about open sourcing comes from, as we all say in the community, all skin folk ain't kinfolk, and performative allyship is rife. So I think it's very important to, if you're going to call on people and if you're going to put your hand up, I think it's very important to how I went about picking my Black Taxi team members was that they were genuine and that they were committed to being a part of the team. And D&I is, like we're saying, it's not this thing that's a flash in the pan. It's something that has to change, and it's going to take some time to change. So my hesitation comes from these people that now, because it's so prevalent and everybody is a chief diversity and inclusive officer and whatever the case may be, and everyone wants to be on board, where are you going to be 8 months from now? How are you going to feel about it 8 months from now? And if me personally, I don't know you on that level, or I don't see your level of commitment in your personal life as well as your professional life, I'm going to be very hesitant to align you with Black Taxi, because at the end of the day, it's my reputation, right? Like when you think about Black Taxi, you think about me, and the success and failure of Black Taxi lives and dies by my face. And I understand that. So if you want to be a part of this, and if you're going to open source, I'm just saying, pick your allies very, 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 I can't say it enough, carefully, because again, it's your reputation at the end of the day. It's your life at the end of the day. So if you're going to do it, great. And I'm by all means, I'm saying, like, yes, we want everyone to take it and do with it what you will. But again, just make sure these people are genuine and they're committed, because as Mel said, it took us 100 years to get here and be on this panel having this conversation. So you got to be in for the long time and not the good time, right?
Yeah,
All
and
right.
I think, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, that was my question. I really appreciate, I mean, being included here and you answering that. I think for me, it is about how do we make sure, because I do think you're right, there's this moment in time where everyone's jumping on, and we've seen this in the past with like Me Too, and people kind of lose steam on it. But I also think there's lots of people and lots of us within agencies that are trying to figure it out. And I almost feel like there's so many of us trying to figure out the same things that we're probably, if you take all of that combined energy, like if we shared more, if we understood more, like you talked about, you've rewritten the HR policies. Well, we've all got to do that. So if that was open sourced, now the team, and it's always a finite team of humans that can move things forward and want to be committed and involved. Well, now we don't have to spend time doing that HR thing. We can jump onto something else. So I almost feel like, could open sourcing just move us all further along faster? It's definitely not about just, stealing from and just trying to be a part of the bandwagon. It's just about, are we all spinning through the same cycles? Yet we could, as a collective, because we are, right? Like the industry needs to come together, and POCAM have asked us to do that. So I think that's where the intent of the question comes from. And
thank you for participating and asking the question. And I think, to quote Stephanie, we have to be comfortable with having uncomfortable discussions sometimes and uncomfortable conversations, because out of that, so much positivity can come out of that. And also, it's a way for us to see how we're all really connected. We all want the same things out of life. We all want the same things for our children. Our life experiences might be a little bit different, but we're not so far different that I'm completely different from, anybody else who's at my office who has a different skin shade than me. So we're looking forward. I think the future is positive. There's a lot of potential for us to work together and come together. I do want to thank all of our panelists for participating today. I know I asked some tough questions, so thanks so much for jumping in. And before I turn it back to Connie for the closing statements, I know that we did have one other closing poll, and it was just about the panel itself. Have you learned anything new during this discussion about the Canadian Black experience? So yes, I want to be part of more discussions, as uncomfortable as they may be. Yes, I want to be part of actioning some ideas. Yes, but I don't know what to do next or where to start and who to speak to. No, I didn't learn anything new. Number 5, no, I didn't learn anything new, but I'd like to follow up with more discussion. And number 6, no, I didn't learn anything new, but I'm interested in actively taking part in making changes. So once again, shouts out to all of our panelists, and you can do the snaps or the jazz hands. I'll read their names once again. We had Sandra Bonnick, Nadej Dale, Stephanie Small, Skin Ford, Keith Johnson, Savannah Hamilton, and of course myself moderating. I was very honored to be a part of this discussion. Yours truly, Mel Boogie. Or the government name, Alyssa Langley. Connie, take it away.
Awesome. I just want to thank everybody once again for coming in. Just to mirror what people have said, allyship. And when I had this thought in my head, I was seen for the first time. And I know that some people said, hey, you know what? I see you. So there is, after everything that was blowing up during the summer, it was very emotional. And I felt like, hey, how do we make a difference? From there, another agency, McCann World Group, actually had contacted me as well and said, you know what, I see you. And they were like, let's make a difference as well. And so you're going to see a bunch of great things coming out from them as well. Then Judy McLean from Group M, I actually met her through different networking event that McCann put me on. Then I went to Group M, and Judy opened up everything, her Rolodex, her time, her effort, and was so persistent to do something together. So we started doing this as well. And then it's just beautiful seeing everyone working together. We have Black Taxi. I don't think it's a matter of me, it's a matter of we. Everyone's coming together to work together. So you guys are gonna see amazing things coming down the pipeline. We're working as a team because we just wanna make a difference. On behalf of Collective Society, we've got Mel, who's a part of it, Rolton, you guys see, Jacqueline, David, Ryan. It's absolutely tireless efforts that everyone's putting in. And again, thank you, Judy, for giving the platform. And guys, please stay tuned for the amazing things that we're all creating together, and some amazing masterclasses that we're going to be putting out for youth through McCann World Group. And hopefully you'll see some more things between Group M, Black Taxi, and all of us as a collective. That's where Collective Society comes from. It's not from just people of color. We need everybody to make a difference, or else change isn't going to happen. So please check us all out. Log on to the Collective Society website if you would like more. Black Taxi, Group M, and of course, look out what's coming down the pipelines with McCann World Group as well. Judy, can you just do the honors of closing us all out?
Thank you, Connie. Honestly, everyone, thank you so much for being here tonight, for listening to our great panelists. Panelists, thank you so much for coming on this journey and sharing your hearts and being authentic and being real. And as we know, as you know, people of color, Black people, it's hard, it's tough. We wear a mask every day. It's hard. And not even just being in the office right now. It's difficult. We've gone through as a people many things, but the positivity in it is that around the world has echoed that social injustice needs to change. Things need to change. The world, even with COVID, just needed to stop and shift, because how we were living and what we were doing is just not working for the collective. So I'm just happy that everybody is here on this journey. We look forward to partnering more with Collective Society and Black Taxi. And just thank you. I can't even, I mean, this has been months in the making of talking, of meetings and chatting. And honestly, it's just like, this brings so much joy to my heart. So thank you, Group M. Thank you, Black Taxi. But all in all, thank you, Collective Society 360. Thank you so much. Good night, everyone. We wish you all the best.
Everyone give themselves a round of applause. Thank you for sticking it through. Give yourself a pat on the back, and we rock. We'll see you guys soon.
Can we play some music? Can we play some music?
Yeah.
Well, I apologize in advance for my dance moves.
It's not complete until you have dance moves.